Hello and welcome to Insights for Manufacturing. I'm your host, Jeff Beecham, and throughout the series, we'll be looking at some of the challenges and opportunities facing UK manufacturing in 2022. In our fortnightly episodes, I'm hosting a range of guests from service businesses and support organisations, providing subject matter expertise and guidance on a diverse range of topics affecting UK manufacturing. Today, we're going to be looking at how innovation and new manufacturing technologies are helping the growth and sustainability of UK manufacturing. So I'm delighted to welcome my special guest, Mike Wilson, the Chief Automation Officer at the Manufacturing Technology Centre. Welcome, Mike, and how are you?
Thank you, Jeff. Very well, thank you.
Good. It's good to have you on. And this episode follows a visit I had over at the MTC with you a week or so ago, which was so interesting. So before we get into the detail of the discussion, Mike, can you tell me a bit about yourself and what your role is at the MTC?
Sure, I'd be very happy to. So I've been involved in automation robotics for 40 years now, which is a little bit scary because I don't feel that old. But I started in the automotive sector in what was then called British Leyland, working on the early applications of robots in the car industry, and then over the time I've worked for various suppliers. Various robot suppliers. I've also been an independent consultant, and I'm now at the MTC. And I've been at the MTC now for a year and a half, and my role there is really about developing and implementing our strategy for automation robotics, and it's largely focused on how do we encourage UK manufacturing to adopt more automation and robotics. What kind of services should we provide to provide the assistance that manufacturing needs, and also to help in terms of directing the development of the technologies so that we can ensure that UK manufacturing has access to the kind of technologies that it should be using in 2 to 5 years' time.
Right, okay. So it's sort of like, from an outsider looking in, it's sort of like an innovation, would an incubator be the right sort of phrase? Innovation and doing all this sort of forward technology development and advancement for businesses before they can even think about going into designing or production.
It's partly that, and that's definitely an important element of what we do is building demonstrators to show industry what the art of the possible might be. Some of it is about identifying and solving particular challenges that industry might have, but it's also about helping businesses adopt what's commercially available when they don't have the expertise to identify what they really need or to identify the right suppliers to deliver it to them. We're there to help them get through that journey so that we try and de-risk the projects as much as possible. We try to ensure that all of our clients can achieve a successful outcome with any automation adoption project.
How does that actually work in terms of financing what you do, the services that you provide for UK manufacturing? Is that generally done through sort of funding or grants? How do the sort of end users of your services get access to that financially?
Well, we operate in a number of different ways. We're a non-profit organisation, so we're not there to make money, but obviously we do need to pay the bills. We've been operating for 10 years now, and our funding comes from a number of different sources, partly through government, some of which is through applying for Innovate projects in the same way that any other business can do. And we often get involved in consortia, and we help build consortia to apply for those Innovate funded projects so that we can help develop the technologies, because that's more about the development side. Where it comes to implementation, we do a lot of projects on a one-on-one basis with our clients, and those projects range from fairly sizable projects with some of the larger enterprises down to individual projects that we do with a lot of SMEs, and in particular with the SMEs we are able to provide funding so that they don't necessarily have to pay the same rate as the large enterprises, and a typical SME project would get 50% of our time funded through those kind of grants, and we help sort that out. So we do try and make it easy for the SMEs to engage with us.
Right. Okay. So you can do the sort of signposting to where the funding or the grants might come from.
Yes.
Because I guess a lot of, I've been speaking to some SMEs recently about, sort of innovation and, grants, funding and all that sort of stuff. And I think there's a bit of a consensus that, there's information out there, but it's not always totally visible or, so the fact that you're, I guess, helping, the individual organizations, and pointing them in the right direction for funding and things like that, it cuts out a bit of that process for them, I guess, takes away a little bit of the stress and the worry. And I suppose most manufacturing businesses are just really, really busy anyway, and probably haven't got a lot of time to be searching around for various routes to funding or finance. So that's really good to know. Thanks for sharing that. So you've mentioned SMEs, you've mentioned larger enterprises. Where is the bulk of the work that you do at MTC? I think there's a bit of a myth, call it a myth, that, organizations like the MTC are only really geared up for OEMs and big companies, but that's not actually the case, is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, we do have a range of members. So we have 100 companies typically who are members of the MTC, and within that encompasses both manufacturers or industries as well as technology providers, and those members do range from some very large global businesses through to SMEs, and in addition to sort of helping them and working with them, we also engage very much on a sort of one-on-one basis with individual clients. And I completely agree that a lot of companies, particularly in the SME sector, do feel that the landscape is just complicated. It's too difficult to navigate, and they also come to places like the MTC, and they kind of look at the facilities and think we're not appropriate for them. But nothing is further from the truth. We've worked with and supported hundreds of SMEs, and we do have a team that's specifically set up to engage with those SMEs, as you say, to signpost them in the right direction in terms of funding, but also to try and help them understand what are the challenges that we can help with, and also we can actually come in and provide some additional temporary resource to help them address a particular challenge. Once it's done, we can go away again. We can help them in terms of skills. We can help them de-risk projects. We can help them demonstrate what could be done. So it is about trying to make things easier for those SMEs.
Right. Okay. And I understand you're actually running an apprenticeship program as well these days. Is that fairly new, or when did that sort of come in?
The apprenticeship program has been running for a number of years now. I think it's 6 or 7 years, and it was actually originally created because there was a realization that it's all very well developing technologies and demonstrators to show what industry could do with those technologies, but unless you actually address the skills issue, so you give industry the skills to then use and adopt those technologies, you're still going to have a problem. So that there was a realization that we needed to build an apprenticeship program alongside our technology development activities, and that's been running very successfully now for a number of years. We have an apprentice school both in Coventry and also down near Oxford, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but we have a few hundred apprentices going through our system every year. And one of the key things that I would state is that they're very much exposed to the more advanced technologies. Maybe it's robotics, maybe it's additive manufacturing. So they do get an understanding of these technologies as part of their apprenticeship. And we found that they're very valuable employees when they come out of our system. And we don't have any problems placing them in manufacturing businesses.
Brilliant. And those sort of skills are, they're greatly needed in manufacturing. So that's really good to know. So you mentioned, Mike, certain other, support organisations or partner organisations. What other businesses do you partner with on projects? I mean, I know you sort of you do stuff with, is it Innovate UK, and you're obviously part of the Catapult. What are the range of support organisations do you partner with?
So we are, as you say, very much a part of the High Value Manufacturing Catapult. There are 7 centres within that organisation, including ourselves, and we are increasingly working more closely so that we can share resources, we can solve the big challenges that manufacturing may be facing. So that's one element of what we do. We should also remember that the MTC was originally set up to help bridge the gap between the clever ideas and technologies that were coming out of universities and what industry actually needs, to move technologies from relatively low technology readiness levels, typically coming out of universities at level 3, through the levels up to level 7, 8, and 9, where it can actually be applied within industry. And that was the original premise that the MTC was set up to address, and we're continuing to work on that. So we do work quite closely with a number of universities, our founding universities in Birmingham, Loughborough and Nottingham, and we continue to work very closely with them and others in terms of both taking ideas, concepts and technologies from them and developing them to the point where industry can use them, but also feeding the challenges back down into the universities. So we help understand what industry needs, and we can feed that into the universities, so the work they're doing is appropriate for what industry wants.
Brilliant.
We do also work with other organizations like Made Smarter, for example. So we're part of the delivery team for the Made Smarter program in the West Midlands, and that's very much about helping SMEs adopt current existing technologies. So it is very much trying to partner with the right people to ensure that we can deliver what UK manufacturing and UK industry actually needs.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So, we talk about the UK, being behind many of the other, what I would class as advanced economies, in terms of robotics or robots per capita. We're way down that sort of league table. Where are we currently, Mike? And what's the biggest impact that the MTC can provide for UK manufacturers in terms of robotics specifically? Because it's a huge opportunity.
It certainly is. We and I think this is largely cultural, that we've not adopted robot automation in the UK at the same level as many of our competitors. We're currently 24th in the world in terms of our position on the robot density league table, which is the number of robots per 10,000 workers. So a relative measure. And we're behind countries that you'd expect to see higher up, places like Germany, for example, Japan, the US. But South Korea are currently leading that table. We're behind countries like Denmark, which you don't necessarily recognize as having a significant manufacturing sector. And I should stress, we're still the 9th largest manufacturer in the world. So we do still have significant manufacturing in the UK. And traditionally, we've not been investing in the latest technologies across the board. And robots is just an element of that. I was just going to say, Jeff, we're trying to change that. And that's really one of my main activities.
What does that involve, Mike? I mean, how are you sort of engaging with with UK manufacturing to, almost try and, reverse this decline of productivity? We've also had the recent exodus of a lot of EU workers, because of Brexit. So we're short of labour. So that there's an additional problem to compound, a lack of productivity in the first place. So how are you actually going about engaging with UK manufacturing, and what sort of barriers or challenges are you coming up with? You mentioned the mindset. What else are you finding?
Well, we conducted a study towards the end of last year and produced a report, which is available via our website, and that identified the particular barriers that we feel need to be addressed. And the way we did the report, I think, was quite important, because we got experts from their particular fields to input into the report, and that ranged across all sorts of industry sectors, from food through to engineering. It ranged from education, research, all the way through to the adoption of automation, and it also included the media and the unions. So we got a very broad range of inputs, and from the inputs that we got, we distilled what were seen to be the major barriers. And they really could be categorized in sort of four main groups. It was awareness, and that's about people understanding what the technology could do for them, and where the technology is in terms of its, if I can say, adoptability.
Yeah.
The second one was finance. So it was more about access to finance, and how you pay for this kind of equipment. Third one was skills, which I think most people wouldn't be surprised about, but how do we ensure that we got the right skills to use this equipment?
Sure.
And the final one was really support. So it was how do we help businesses adopt these kind of technologies? So we put the report together, and I should stress that's only the start. What we're trying to do going forward now is build groups of stakeholders who can help us address each of those particular challenges. And that again will encompass not just the vendors, not just industry, but I want to make sure that we get people like the banks and the financial institutions involved. I want to make sure we get the educationalists involved, because we need to collectively figure out the answers to these barriers. And if I can give you one specific example, there are training courses available that people can undertake to learn how to program robots. There are apprentice programs where people can up their skills so that they can successfully adopt automation.
Yeah.
But most of those require a bigger commitment. And a lot of our SMEs cannot afford to release people for any significant length of time because they're too busy doing what they do. So what we really need to try and do is to find ways of developing short courses or half-day programs that people can then learn what they need to learn in small elements without it disturbing their normal day-to-day activities too much.
Fantastic. So there's a lot of work going on to that, and I guess this will be rolled out over a period of time and naturally pick up pace as more people and organisations come on board. I'm glad you've mentioned the education side of things as well, and I think there's been this whole furore over the last few years about the apprenticeship levy, and there are mixed sort of feelings about that, but it's good to see that there are some really good courses available for robotics and automation, and as you say, if we can get more banks involved and somehow it can be made a little bit more accessible to SMEs, and as you say, the time is always a factor. Businesses are always busy and stretched, particularly with with say EU workers going back. COVID's had a huge impact, and from a factory point of view, in over 20 years of recruiting, I think it's fair to say that it's always pretty tough to get really, really good skills, whether it be engineers, whether it be leadership or factory floor, operators, setters. It's really, really tough. So, retaining those skills already within the business is one challenge. And, a lot of businesses have really cut back and they're quite lean from a manpower point of view. And this is where I think some of the figures have come out recently. I did hear the other day that I think about 40% of SME manufacturers are looking at hiring up to 6 people before the end of March, which is great. Not sure where they're all going to come from, but it's really, really good to see. And with the support in terms of training for robotics and automation, that's really going to help SME companies, I think. So there seems to be a growing trend, or there is a growing trend for even more reshoring, which is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and I know you are too. Where do you see the biggest gains across UK manufacturing, Mike, and what can the MTC do to help maximise opportunities?
I think there are a number of challenges within that, and you've mentioned the labour shortage. So we do currently have a labour shortage, and obviously, as businesses try to bring production back to the UK, that potentially is going to put more of a requirement for labour. So there is definitely a need to ensure that we utilise automation as much as we possibly and sensibly can. And that's certainly an area where the MTC can help. We have quite a few people who have got experience of doing this for real. So it's not about theoretical exercises. This is about people that have been in the shoes of the people that are trying to buy this kind of equipment. And we provide, if you like, vendor agnostic advice. We're not there to sell anything. So if automation isn't the right answer, then we'll be honest and we'll say that.
Yep.
But what we can particularly do is help businesses learn how to acquire this kind of technology. And that would include things like identifying the most appropriate applications to be looking at. And those are not necessarily the most complex or challenging operations within the factory. And often they're not, particularly for people that have not done it before. It's about finding something relatively simple to cut your teeth on, as it were. The second step then is to build the business case, to make sure that you're putting all the right savings into the calculation so that you can then justify the amount of money that you need to spend. And the next step really is very important for me, is actually writing the specification for what you want to buy. And that's often a challenge for SMEs, partly because they don't have time and also partly because they have less experience of doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go to a supplier to buy some equipment, you need to be able to tell them exactly what it is you want. And finally, it's the choosing of the supplier. There are more than 250 systems integrators in the UK that are quite capable of delivering robot automation solutions, but they all have different expertise, different sectors, different applications. And for your average, particularly SME, it's to some extent a matter of luck, because they haven't got the time to research that market. They just don't have the resources. Whereas we've done that, and we do that on a continuous basis. So we can provide advice in terms of the right people to go to. So there, if you like, our objective is to help develop what we like to call informed customers that know what it is they want to buy, know how to buy it, know where to buy it from. And what we're really trying to do is to provide that education during the process, so that we may do more of the work the first time we help. Second time we help, we definitely want to be doing less. And by the third time, we're hoping that that client has understood and learned, and then they can go out and do it themselves. And that's, if you like, one of the elements of what the MTC can do to help businesses address both the labour shortage, but also if they're thinking of bringing things back to the UK, of how we can help do it. But that's only one element of it. We do also look at things like factory layouts. We do look at digital technologies, not just automation. We do look at new manufacturing processes, which might be additive, for example, or might involve laser technologies. So we can help companies both with product design. We can help them with manufacturing technologies to ensure that when they do bring something back, they're then applying the latest technologies to make it both as competitively as possible, but also as effectively as possible. And we have companies where we have successfully done that. There's an example in the West Midlands, a company called Albert Jagger, where we went in and we helped them look at the layout of their factory, the way the processes were organized and so on. And as a result of the work we've done, they were actually able to reshore production from China. And they've reduced their costs as a result by 20 to 50%. They reduced their stock holding by 50%. So significant improvements in their business. And as a result of doing that, we're now looking at the automation and the digital angles for them to see if we can help improve their manufacturing further.
Brilliant. I mean, that's a great case study to share as well. You know, huge cost savings and efficiency improvement is that's what everybody wants to hear, really, and what most manufacturers are striving to get to. So I know there are certain things you can talk about and certain things you may not be able to talk about in terms of things that MTC is working on, and what's coming through the technology pipeline. I understand there's some sensitivity around certain customers and things like that, but from an overall technology point of view, can you give any indication as to what might be coming next? What's going to be the next big thing in terms of, processes, for example, or, like additives been taken off over the last sort of, 5 to 10 years? What's coming next from a technological point of view?
I wouldn't like to say that there's any kind of significant step changes, but I do think it's more of what we've been looking at. So it's about finding the right applications for additive technologies, for example, and people are starting to do that now. it is about increased adoption of automation. It's about increased adoption of digital technologies. Things like artificial intelligence are starting to be embedded in some of our technologies, both digital, vision, and robotics. And it's actually making the technology much easier to apply and to use. And I think that's the key to all of this. We may be embedding some fairly high-tech software and equipment inside some of our facilities, but what it's actually doing is making them easier to operate and easier to program, and therefore more accessible to more businesses. And I think that's the key to it, really, is making the implementation and the operation much easier, which will then make it easier for companies to then apply new systems, new technologies.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, thanks for that, Mike. What are the plans for the rest of the year then, in terms of, you know, any events? What's, you know, from a news point of view, is there anything sort of significant that you can share with us that MTC is involved in throughout the calendar?
Sure. I mean, we're obviously attending a number of exhibitions over the year, so we will be at MAC, for example. But more particularly, I wanted to mention an event that we're organising, which is taking place on the 4th and 5th of May, and it's a conference and exhibition all about robotics and automation. And our objective for that conference is really twofold. One is to provide an opportunity for industry to meet with the supply chain on a neutral venue, and try and encourage more discussion between both the industry players and the equipment vendors and the systems integrators, and also the research institutions and the academics. And also we want to try and build more of a community to address some of the barriers that we've identified in our report. So some of the sessions are going to be focused on particular things like finance, like skills, like awareness, so that we can find ways of addressing those barriers, knock those down, and really get UK manufacturing motoring by adopting the latest automation technologies to improve our productivity, improve our competitiveness, and really make UK manufacturing achieve the success that I think it deserves.
Absolutely. So just to recap then for our audience or listeners, the date again was the 4th of May?
4th and 5th of May. It's a 2-day event. It's free of charge in terms of entry. So and people can register if they go on to the MTC website. They will find a link to the event, and people will be able to register that way.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for sharing that, Mike. So that wraps up today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion. Thank you very much again to Mike Wilson. Thank you for listening, and look out for the next episode of Insights for Manufacturing. See you next time, and bye-bye.